Hello, everyone. This is Joe Brewer here, and you can see these little sneaky hellos from my daughter Elise in the background, carrying a hammock on her shoulders. How are you all doing today? It seems like a long time since we've done one of these webinars. I believe the last one was in October, if I remember correctly. And so I'm really excited to have you all here today, where we are going to be discussing Earth Regenerators, how it came to be the way that it is, what's been happening kind of behind the scenes in the last few months, and how we're preparing for some big changes, and what we are setting out to do together in the next year. Now, today I am really wanting to invite all of you who have not been intimately connected to the work that's happening in Earth Regenerators in the last few months to feel very welcome, to come and join us and move more close to the community, get to know people better, and discover what's happening here. And for the many of you who have been very involved working in a lot of the work groups that we're going to be discussing today, I'm just really excited to celebrate all of your work that I've gotten to witness blossoming around this mission that we've taken in, this call to service to serve the regeneration of the earth. Now, as a way of helping us get started today, what I'd like to do is share a little poll with all of you and ask you to fill it out. So here is a poll that I would love for you to just start filling in. It's like, how are you feeling today? And you can see I've given you a few options that are relatively different from each other. Just pick the one that feels the most true, the most resonant for you. And I'm really curious how everyone's feeling. Ellie, sweetie, Daddy's having a call right now.
I need to go to the pool.
Well, go in the toilet and go poopies in, sweetie. Okay. And my daughter is being a good child. What I really want to do is to embrace honestly and authentically how we are feeling today as we start to weave together what could be a path moving forward for all of us. And I'm already seeing as the poll is being filled in that we're getting some very different feelings that people are having. You know, some of you are feeling very excited and hopeful and engaged. Others are, it's like, not gonna lie, there's some despair. I'm struggling. This is a tough time. We're dealing with some really difficult things, and some people are stressed and feeling worn down by everything that's been going on. And I understand a poll like this doesn't allow you to select more than one option, and so you might be feeling very polarized and have very conflicting feelings and have more than one of these at the same time. But I'm really happy to see how many of you are feeling excited and hopeful, and really appreciating the honesty for those of you who are feeling more hardship and struggle. As you know, this topic of Earth regeneration has something of a dark shadow, which is the dark shadow of planetary collapse, that we're in the midst of unprecedented planetary changes, and that we're going to have to deal with some very hard things moving forward in the future. Pardon me for one moment. What I'm really excited about today is to share with you the story of Earth Regenerators as it has unfolded and what is becoming possible for all of us as we move into this next year. Last year was really dominated by the disruptions to the planetary system because of a global pandemic. And what's happening now is many of us are finding it normal to be in lockdown for months on end. And a lot of people here, I'm sure, are feeling closed in and trapped in their homes, unable to get out and socialize. And so I hope that that this social gathering today will be helpful for some more of us to connect to each other. My daughter is calling to me and needing my attention, and my wife hasn't come back from her trip. So I'm actually giving a webinar while at the same time watching my child, because I don't have anyone who can watch her for me. So she's calling me from the house. So apologies for a small distraction here for a moment. Elise, sweetie, I can't help you right now because I'm on a call. Please take off your shirt and you can get in the shower and clean up, okay?
I don't want.
Then stay there until you're ready, but I'm not able to help you right now, sweetie. You can do it. You're a big kid now. So what I really want to share with all of you today is how far things have come since we started Earth Regenerators a little more than a year ago. And as many of you will recall from when we gave webinars last year, this Crowdcast platform allows us to pose questions. You can see the button here at the bottom of the screen that says Ask a Question, that you can pose questions there, and then you can vote for the questions you'd like to hear answered. And so I'm going to give a presentation, and after the presentation is over, we will go through the questions that are included there in the order that get the most votes. So the most voted questions will be addressed first, and then we'll move down the list. And one thing that's really beautiful is this platform also allows me to invite the person who asks the question to come into a video chat. So if you're able to, if you pose a question, we can have a little discussion about it. So it gives us a little bit more interaction than we'd have just listening to me speak the whole time. So with that said, I would really like to begin the presentation portion of today's conversation. And so let me go into screen sharing. And here we go. Is screen share happening? Looks like it's loading. And as we're able to start having this conversation, okay, it says we're screen sharing now. What I'll do is go to the presentation mode. And so here is our topic for today. Earth regeneration in 2021, creating an action plan for the next year. Okay, and okay, Lisa, I'll help you take off your tapabokka. In our house, we don't buy masks. We just use cloths and towels and bandanas and tie them around our necks. And so Elise needs help untying hers. So yes, apologies, this is a real life parenting situation. And Elise is so well behaved that I'm able to help to talk with all of you for the most part while I'm helping her. So yes, sorry about that interruption. Jessica went away on a hiking and camping trip and was supposed to be back this morning, but they've been delayed getting back. So that's why I'm a little having little interruptions at the moment. But our children are so important that I don't mind doing it. So our topic today really is how do we move forward in the next year together with everything that has developed so far. And this will be sort of a story in two parts, looking back to the history of what has happened in the last roughly 13 months and all that it is enabling us to do together for the coming year. So the general schematic or conceptual way that I would say this is, if we look at this year, 2021, using the Gregorian calendar, which we might choose to use indigenous calendars or other kinds of timekeeping in another time, but for now we'll use this one because it's the standard. What I see is that as the Earth is moving forward in time, our conversation is around really two parallel tracks of activity that are deeply connected to each other, as we'll see in the session today. One of them is the Earth Regenerators community, which has just passed 2,500 members, currently has 2,515 members, and was very active last year with webinars and activities, and then sort of went inward into a quieter public-facing mode and a much deeper activity of building community for a small, about 100 or so of the members of this community. And this has been growing beautifully in the last few months. In parallel with this, we've been laying the groundwork for the work here in Barichara, Colombia, for creating what we call Barichara Ecoversity, which is a way of having a bioregional design effort for the territory here in the Northern Andes of Colombia that also can be a model of education, research, and design for regenerative practices. Now, our goal in the future is to really build a network of bioregions, and some groundwork has been laid for this, but that's still mostly ahead of us. And at present, we're building capacity to move in the direction of having a planetary scale network of bioregional learning centers and regenerative territorial projects, meaning at the landscape scale for entire regions, which is something that this work is moving toward. But right now we have this really important focus on these two parts, and we want to know how they relate to each other. So I drew this diagram to help us get some kind of shared context for the conversation today, which is that Earth Regenerators began on December 29th, 2019, when I was writing a manuscript for the book, The Design Pathway for Regenerating Earth. And instead of publishing the book, I decided to invite people into a study group. I said, who would like to use the manuscript of this book to have discussions? And we can start to talk. And this is when people started joining me to read the book chapters, engaging in discussions. These webinars that we were doing all of last year began. And then we started having community Zoom calls that followed the webinars. And this started building a little bit deeper relationship. And this is sort of what I call phase one of the story of Earth Regenerators, what you might call Joe's study group, which is the work really focused around what I was presenting, the discussions I was leading. And Earth Regenerators grew from 0 members to about 2,000 members during this time. And then starting in June and July, as we'll discuss a little more in a moment, we started the Community Regenerators Mutual Learning, a training process for us to build community, for a set of people to be facilitators of design for the entire platform. And that this, since roughly end of October, early November, has allowed the explosion of groups with different thematic focus, different work groups and projects, the design of the platform itself, and all of these emergent ways of interacting with each other, which has largely been invisible to the public-facing group, only because it was taking form and was nascent, and it wasn't clear which parts would continue and which parts weren't. But now we're ready to show more of what has been happening and invite all of the rest of you into this amazing discussion, this amazing, actually, set of activities and design work. So first, the Community Regenerators. I'd like you all to say hi to Diego Gali, who is here on the call with us today. And you can see this lovely picture of him caring for a tree, and the same expression of care and love that's on his face and in his hands here is the same way that he was helping hold this group of Community Regenerators. What happened was he was the person who offered to host the community Zoom calls after the webinars. If I remember correctly, Diego, this was in March or April of last year, so fairly early in the life of Earth Regenerators. And what we did was we put out a call to the entire platform. If anyone was interested, we would offer a 2-month-long training / mutual learnings, we'd all learn together, for people to become community regenerators. And these people would receive the benefit of this training in exchange for offering service to help Earth Regenerators. Not the platform Earth Regenerators, but any person who wants to help regenerate the Earth. This invited 35 people who really committed themselves to this process, went through a framing and pro-social, which we've talked about before in other webinars, a way of learning how to cooperate and form really effective teams. And they have been, ever since late October, they have been supporting a lot of work behind the scenes to enable Earth Regenerators to become like Earth Regenerators 2.0 with a lot more capabilities than it had before. Now, in parallel with this, not from within Community Regenerators, it started to happen on its own, even though some of the people involved were in the Community Regenerators cohort, others were not. These 3 women, Tara, Amber, and Gail, all came together and asked, could we have a book club for Joe's book and just read it together and have weekly discussions? This idea started in September, and it was so successful. I think they had 12 people, if I remember right, so it wasn't a large group, but the quality of conversations and the depth of relationships that grew from it was just inspiring and empowering. And so they actually contacted me and said, we'd like to talk about how it's going. And in a meeting together, we discussed that we could develop this book club into a way of designing curriculum to use materials from the book and other materials to create a curriculum for Earth regeneration. And so they formed into a curriculum design group that has been very active, and I think it currently has about 40 members, and has been laying the groundwork for creating an online design school that takes the kind of learning we did all of last year to an entirely new level. And so these were 2 activities running, overlapping, and in parallel with each other. No, sweetie, I can't leave my computer here because I'm giving a presentation right now. So are you gonna go take a shower? And so what this shows us already is that we have two fairly large groups, 35 in one group, 40 in the other. A lot of overlap where community regenerators are in the curriculum design group. So it's less than 75 in total. But this group of people has been very active, laying groundwork for a lot of things that we can do now. Now, the key is just with these two groups and their activities, and there's actually a lot more than this. The thing I really want to stress is that we have an evolutionary process here, which is to go from individuals with their interest to be involved, growing in through what's called an evolutionary transition, where they bring the evolutionary process to a higher level of organization and start to function at the level of shared goals so that they can work as effective teams. And we use the pro-social framework to help us do this. And you can ask the members of these groups. Pro-social has been very helpful for us and has really been wonderful for enabling us to do these things. So what's happened is basically this. As we are spread all over the physical planet Earth, we have at the same time created an equal entrance, non-hierarchical way of becoming community members and friends, which form such deep trust among each other that we were able to spawn the emergence of different clusters of activity, different focus groups, which is visualized here in this cluster diagram of a network forming that starts relatively flat and undifferentiated and then taking on increasing focused modular structure of activities. And that this has been the way you can imagine all of these groups forming in the last 6 months. Now, the real question for us is, as all of these groups are forming and doing their work, how can this give rise to a planetary network of bioregional economies? How can we go from having a digital world on one side and a physical world on the other, which have some kind of interactions with each other, to allow us to organize our activities within different work groups so that we can actually regenerate the physical Earth itself, the world that we're all a part of? And this is something that is no longer an idle question. It's something we're starting to see evidence for how it's already working. And I'm going to share some examples of that in a moment. So here's one example. In the beginning of December, we launched the Barichara Regeneration Fund, and we were able to bring in donations and investments totaling $50,000 to be able to run community projects here and set up a foundation. And that this is enabling local community leaders in Barichara, local Colombian leaders who have already had regenerative projects before we arrived, to coordinate among their projects while partnering with the big world, this planetary scale platform of Earth Regenerators that is bringing capacities and resources to the local community. And for those of you who were in the webinar that happened in March of last year, when we talked about designing a portfolio for an Earth Regeneration Fund, that this is all about learning how to function as groups, where we can raise money or pool money and buy or acquire plots of land that need to be regenerated, and also partner with existing projects where people are already regenerating the land, and then create a grouping of projects organized across a bioregion so that we can diversify the risks and benefits and create measurement tools for how the flow of regeneration happens across them. And this allows us to create a platform for cooperation. Well, we're actually doing this in Barichara right now. And it's been so successful that we've been able to negotiate the purchase of this piece of land. And what's more, one of our friends, Stefan, came to Barichara a couple weeks ago with a drone and captured aerial photography like this photo and some video footage to be able to document what we're doing here in Barichara, which is a great example of someone from the global network, someone from my social network who is watching what we're doing, finding so much inspiration that he physically came here to do this, which is one example of the digital and the physical meeting each other. But also, look at the degradation, look at the erosion on this piece of land. And the building that you see here at the bottom, where we're going to talk with the village of Villanueva about doing regeneration on that land as well. And now what I want you to imagine here is that as more people come to work with us in the Barichara Ecoversity and the design work we're doing locally, And as more people organize global capacities to learn how to do regeneration at territorial scales, that pieces of land like this one will begin to be healed. And our purpose for this land is to restore the native tropical dry forest, which means to build water retention systems and stop erosion, to partner with downhill in the valley that this drains into, and to build a project of regeneration across a key part of the territory that is vital for the protection of water for the people living here. So this is an example of money being raised and a negotiation being empowered to say we can actually regenerate this land, pull together the resources and people to help us do the work because of our global network. So this relationship between physical, place-based work and the global network is already making things happen. And just so you know, the name of the nature reserve that is going to be located here is called the Origin of Water. And we're going to use this as a demonstration site for reforestation work for the entire territory. At the same time, members of the Earth Regenerators community are starting to arrive in Barichara. So here in this picture are Eva Reutmann and Thomas Bond, who have both come here from Denmark to help us with projects. Eva is very active with setting up composting toilets and microorganisms and other kinds of soil regeneration work. And Thomas is mapping out the native plants and building up reforestation research frameworks to help with the work that we're already doing and that we're preparing to do in the future. Now, the interesting thing is that they've arrived about a month ago and are already practicing bioregional regeneration with us. But we have more people scheduled to come later this year, and a lot of people in the network who are sort of lurking and thinking, maybe I'll come to Barichara. This is pretty exciting. And what this shows us is that this is one example of the digital infrastructure enabling people to physically gather and do work together. Something that we want to see happen in other bioregions around the world, and that we'd like this platform to support as well. And we're prototyping and learning how to do it with the work here in Colombia. So if we summarized it like this, there was this creation of the Community Regenerators group, and in parallel with it, the emergence of the curriculum design group, with a lot of overlap and exchanges among the people. All of these activities started to explode into action, and it very quickly became clear that we need some organizing structure that is not top-down, that is not your normal centralized hierarchy. We need some way of coordinating among our efforts. And so one thing that happened was within Community Regenerators, a small focus group was created for the governance design process to propose ideas for how we could do this. And what I'm going to share in the rest of this presentation is one of the ways that we can move forward to create this organizing structure. Okay, sweetie. And so the key thing to have in mind here is that we want to maintain this creative flow of autonomous projects, but we want them to also have coherence between each other so that they can be mutually supportive and reinforcing. We don't want just a set of isolated projects. We want them to be able to work together where it makes sense. And we'd really like decisions made in one group to be supportive of other groups, but not to hinder them. So there might be decisions about purchasing a Zoom account or upgrading some software that's being used, or making decisions about calendars and scheduling that could be related from one group to another. So this has been a major point of discussion in the months of December and January that we're now moving into implementation as we've moved into the month of February. So what we're really talking about here is creating a planetary platform, a platform that has people from all over the planet who would like to be able to cooperate with each other. And it has some interacting parts, one that is digital and online, that is the mobile app of Mighty Networks that hosts the Earth Regenerators community, which has the design pathway book and some learning materials, learning modules that we're creating from them, possibly different kinds of trainings, like to be certified in pro-social or sociocracy, which is a way of governing groups or having groups govern themselves. Returning to the bi-monthly webinars that we had before, or having a different kind of webinars or teach-ins from different members of the community. We're having lots of ideas about this in the curriculum design group. And at the same time, having a design institute physically located in Barichara that can do on-site projects, People can learn how to do territorial planning. You can come and have immersion experiences and learn by doing, participating in projects, and to build up a network of bioregions, of bioregional networks of these kinds of activities, which the Design Institute can help coordinate and support. And as these two sides of the same larger system, as they interact with each other, each is made more powerful by the other. And this framework is something that is already coming into being and is more than a year old. So I'm not saying, let's go create it. I'm saying it's already emerging and we can start to do it now because we have so many pieces in place. Let's see how that works. First, how do we coordinate when there's so many different things? Well, this was a graphic that I created for the governance design group. And I know it's got a lot of text and it's kind of small and difficult to read. So I don't expect you to be able to read it all. But the idea here is that one of the very important ways of governing this entire process is to have a heartbeat, a temporal signature, a time cycle, or a set of time cycles that allow us to see how things fit together. So if you look at the blue line at the bottom that has little white bars for 1 month increments, imagine if we have different learning modules or courses that people can sign up for, and each course is 2 months long. So every 2 months, a new one starts. Well, that could be going on with a regular rhythm of every 2 months. You could join a group, stay with that group for 2 months, and then do something else afterwards, or join a new group and keep going. Well, at the same time, we have these monthly webinars. So every 2 weeks, there would be a webinar that is happening maybe in the Eastern Hemisphere for people in Australia, New Zealand, Asia, and so forth, and another one in the Western Hemisphere and North and South America and Europe. So each hemisphere might get one per month, but there's actually 2 per month happening. So we have ideas like this that we're floating around. And then also we have this notion of campfire talks, which we'll discuss a little bit more in a moment. But the idea is to have people just meet and have important discussions, socialize and bond with each other on such regularity that any given day there might be one going on, that you could either create one or join one. So it's just this regular flow of conversations. And what we see is for a system like this to work, all we need is coordination for events, so that the webinars either support the learning modules or are kept separate from them, depending on their purpose. And these campfire talks or conversations can happen independent of the structures and constraints of the other activities to just allow them to be very organic and free-flowing. So we wanted to think about how all of this complexity could be held. So we considered things like this, like how could the time cycles of different activities relate to each other, which was a really beautiful discussion and helped us see a lot of ways to coordinate efforts that are very easy to do in practice, but have profound benefits for the system as a whole by designing them consciously and intentionally as we go about this work. Here's another really important aspect of this, which is that we currently have 4 ways that we've identified that people are participating in Earth Regenerators. And I've given them the names you can see in the bubbles here. So the important thing is that the learning journeys are basically where a group comes together, like the community regenerators, where a group of 35 people started a 2-month process together and came through all the way to the completion of that 2-month process, which would be like signing up for an online course or something like that. But also a learning journey could be joining a project or a work group, like, oh, I want to be part of the work group for the Barichara Regeneration Fund, or I'm really interested in working with cryptocurrency, or I'd really like to help set up some curriculum design for a learning module, things like this. And these learning journeys are people coming together around a task and a focus, or around a learning journey that is structured in time, and they go through it together. Well, the self-guided learning is more what has happened in the last year, which is you show up on Earth Regenerators, you might read a couple of book chapters, watch a webinar, go to the tutorials, and just watch a few. You may or may not comment on anything, but you're pretty likely to just go through it on your own. And then these campfire talks, which is social gathering points where people intentionally come together to meet each other, become friends, share their personal stories, get to know each other, and find the support that they need that's tailored to their individual lives because they're bringing their whole selves to those conversations. So what we have is a way for individuals to come and just read and learn and watch videos and so on, or they can join a cohort or a work group or a project and get involved over time with shared activities. Or they can just meet people and get to know them and chat and ask for help, or listen and learn, but become socially connected by participating in something like the campfire talks. All of this is what's happening on the online platform. At the same time, we have this design school coming into being in Barichara, where people are beginning to immerse themselves in a bioregional design process. And we envision more people doing this in Barichara and in other regions. For example, a member of the Community Regenerators cohort is starting to lay the groundwork for a project in Puerto Rico. So pretty soon there'll be a bioregional project in Puerto Rico as well. And I know many people in the Earth Regenerators community that have very long-standing permaculture projects, training centers, and so on that would very well qualify as bioregional immersions as well, simply by understanding themselves as already being this way. So the idea is that we start to help all of this online learning connect people to opportunities to join projects or to start projects with social support and with other resources by participating in this ecosystem of activities. And these are the 4 primary ways that we've seen so far that people participate in Earth Regenerators, and that we get feedback through polling and questions and facilitated discussion that people are getting a lot out of this. Pretty amazing considering this is a free platform that people don't pay anything to join. So here's another key piece of this, is that if we want to give birth to this design school and make it effectively free as a planetary platform, then what we need to do is have some people who curate, maintain, and manage the entire platform so that it can build up systemic capacities and provide structural supports for all of the projects, all of the learnings, all of the bioregional immersions. And so the way that we've envisioned this is that there are work groups that are pretty well established. There are focused areas where people have formed groups or formed teams, and they've built themselves up enough that you can see they're going to stick around for a while, and they're doing really good things. Well, these work groups can then send delegates or have representatives, members from their groups, who participate in the design of the platform, who help make decisions, which could mean that they join an active platform group, or the platform group sends out polls and surveys, or goes and interviews them, or facilitates discussion with them to get feedback and input so they can collaboratively design and continually improve, as well as maintain, all of these systemic capacities. And this platform that we're talking about, these platform curators, or this circle of people maintaining the platform on behalf of everyone, can represent the projects that are moving the entire platform forward. And any member of the platform can join these work groups and get involved. So this is better than democracy. This isn't representatives that then vote on your behalf. This is active participation, collaboration, and co-creation among the members, acting as effective teams, with those effective teams coordinating their learnings to support the entire platform overall, which is also how biology does it for complex multicellular organisms. There's a lot of biomimicry involved in this way of building the platform. And this is stuff that's already been growing and developing for months, and we're well on our way to having this come into being. We haven't quite formalized it yet, and we're just entering that process now, with the idea being in the next few weeks, maybe the next month, could take a little longer to 1 to 2 months, but in the near horizon of future, we will build up and make very clear this capacity and coordinate it among the projects, which means all of you on this call and anyone who watches this afterwards can get involved and participate in all of this by joining the platform and joining one of these work groups. And by volunteering your time to co-create, which builds capacities that you benefit from and everyone else benefits from, we create the platform that we all need that doesn't exist anywhere else. So how does this relate to an action plan, a way of articulating how we take action to do this? Well, first thing is, we need to upgrade the Mighty Networks platform right now. It has some limitations in how the site can be laid out and how you can navigate and find information and how you can organize and manage groups. It turns out that there's an upgrade in the subscription to Mighty Networks, which would cost about $1,000 per year, but that would allow us to offer the equivalent of online courses, except that we would use it for everything that I'm talking about now. And this upgrade to the platform will allow us to change the site layout with nested menus, landing pages for different groups, course content, which can be used to navigate and build coherence for the workflow of the projects, making it much easier to stay informed about the different pieces as they're moving, and much easier to know how to participate in the activities because they'll be more visible and better structured so you can understand what's going on if you're joining for the first time. So this upgrade to the platform is something that we plan to do in the next 1 to 2 weeks to enable us to start the work on the other parts. And some members of the curriculum design group, in particular, a member named Sarah Woodrow, who has a lot of user experience and information architecture design background, she's already helping to lay out what this might look like with the curriculum design group and the governance design group having inputs on how to roll this out. So we need to organize the rollout, but this is very much in the action plan for the next few weeks. The next thing is to create a platform circle, which is this platform curators group that is able to hold and maintain the coherence and the improvements of the platform as a whole. People representing the work groups that are very actively building and doing things in the platform as this work is being maintained. This allows us to provide coordination between the work groups, and it maintains a decentralization of leadership. So you can see this is very much no longer Joe's study group. This is different work groups with hundreds of people all leading and doing things and all collectively contributing to the way that we build the platform as a whole, so that someone like me, who was very visible as the founder in the beginning of this, can become much less important to the maintenance of the group. And the group itself is a group of groups, all doing the work that needs to be done, which means even if I were to disappear from the platform entirely, the platform could still function because of this decentralized leadership. And if I remain a participant on the platform, I can't have the founder syndrome of trying to control and maintain it and have a limited view or try to serve my own projects at the expense of the whole. But instead, we together can create everything that is needed for the platform, for all of the members, for anyone who wants to regenerate the Earth. So that, I might have been credited as Joe did a pretty good job last year, but I have very limited capacity. I am a human being after all. And this decentralized leadership is much more intelligent, much more capable than I would ever be as an individual person. So this is improving the collective intelligence of the platform to make it way smarter than any one person could possibly be. And then the other thing is to guide the birthing process that is already underway. It is being born. We don't have to wait for it to be born, but this online design school is coming into being. And these work groups are designing it and building it and testing it. And these bioregional regeneration efforts are already underway, but we can make them better. And more people can participate in them, and we can recruit resources to them and enable things to happen that weren't possible before. So as we upgrade the platform and make it easier for all this coordination to occur and for people to participate in better ways, create a platform circle that decentralizes leadership in a formalized and coherent, understandable way, more people will know how to participate, and then everyone can help guide the birthing process. And this is super important. It'd really be easy to say, well, this is Joe's design school. If you think that, you're going to be wrong. You're going to misunderstand what this is. This is a design school of us, by us, for us as Earth Regenerators. These bioregional regeneration efforts need to happen everywhere on the planet. It's impossible for one person to lead that. It's not even a good idea to try to have one person lead that. What we need is really effective teams with really good coordination, with a lot of support infrastructure. And that's what we're talking about building here. And this is what we see for the coming year, is to actually roll all of this out. It's pretty exciting, isn't it? Okay, so the other thing is all of this is done in the spirit of a gift economy. Many of you know that I don't get paid to do this work. Instead, people donate to me on Patreon. And every now and then someone throws a little tip jar, something in the tip jar on my PayPal account. And this enables me and my family to be supported so that I can just give everything away. I am able to gift into this gift economy because people have supported me on Patreon. And what we're trying to find out is how do we build similar support structures for anyone in Earth Regenerators to be empowered to gift fully into this economy, this different way of doing things. So here are some of the existing groups. And if I listed all of them, it'd be confusing. You wouldn't be able to make sense of how much is going on. So this is just a subset. These are some of the more prominent groups and some of the better established and easier to understand. But each of them actually has work teams and task groups and other teams, other work groups that have formed around them and from them that are growing on their own as well. So here we have the Barichara Regeneration Fund that, like I said, has been raising money. It's enabling us to buy land. It's supporting community grants that we're going to roll out this year in Barichara. There's a group of local leaders, of Colombian regenerative leaders that we're working with. There's a cryptocurrency team that is formed. There's another team that's focusing on the website and storytelling of Barichara. So you could think of that as like one big work group with 35 members and these 3 small groups. There's also a group being formed for grant writing to be able to pursue traditional funding, which would be a 4th subgroup that's in this main group. Of course, there's Community Regenerators, which has produced a lot of things. It held the governance design process during the months of December and January, but also it's created a mediation group, a healing circle. It's rolled out something called Campfire Talks, which is becoming its own circle, and a lot of other activities as well. So this is a clustering of maybe 10 groups, or in some ways, it's connected to all the groups, depending on how you look at it. There's also a group called Beyond Book Club, which is what the book club evolved into when they said, well, we did this for Joe's group, and that was great, or Joe's book. Now let's do it for other books. And they're hosting weekly discussions and readings. They're contributing to design in the curriculum design group, but they're a really potent and active group at the moment. Then the curriculum design group is doing site layout, designing pedagogy and content, a lot of interaction between the curriculum design group and the regenerative parenting group, where people who are parents and want to raise their children differently are sharing rituals and ceremonies and support practices for parents and for educators who are working with children. And this is already alive and well and helping a lot of families. And then these campfire talks were something very interesting that I'm going to talk more about in a moment, because I think it's particularly revealing of what we need as Earth Regenerators and what it's possible to do with a well-functioning platform. And you can see here that I mentioned bonding between people and building of trust, although it actually does a lot more than that. But I'll come back to that in a moment. What I'd like to do is go back and remind us from the work of John Fullerton in the Capital Institute, where he laid out these 8 principles of a regenerative economy. And if you look at each of these and see what we're describing in Earth Regenerators, we actually are a regenerative economy. We work very hard for everyone to be in right relationship to each other, to their place, and to the planet. We really view wealth holistically in a multifaceted way. We're being very innovative, very adaptive, and very responsive as all of this evolves continuously. The members of the platform have the empowerment to participate, and we're going to improve that with a site upgrade. So this empowered participation will get even better, and will empower a lot more people to participate than have been in the last 6 months. With our place-based bioregional work, we really honor where people are coming from and where they need to build their right livelihoods. The edge effect abundance is beautifully described between the digital and the physical, but you can describe the abundance between the different groups and how they interact with each other, the different themes and topics and workflows. There's a lot that's going on. We have a beautiful circulation that's quite robust right now. Our real challenge is to see if we can maintain it and keep it thriving. And all of this is about seeking balance as we continually adapt and respond in changing environments. So you can see that Earth Regenerators is a regenerative economy right now. We already are one. We're also learning how to design one while we build it. And we're living within one to understand what it feels like. So we have this lived experience of participating in our regenerative economy by participating in this platform. And all of this is already happening. It's beautiful, it's amazing, and it's absolutely needed for the future of our species. Okay. I want to talk for a moment about these campfire talks. I want to say that, first of all, this is an approach that is adapted from an indigenous technique from the Aboriginal people of Australia, what they call yarns or yarning, which is the way of having small group conversations between 5 and maybe 7 or 8 people without a specific agenda, where the whole purpose of the conversation is to weave together the stories of what people are living through, what they're dealing with, what they're concerned about, who they are as people, where they come from, their traumas and their hardships, whatever needs to be addressed is managed and maintained in these small group conversations. Now, a member of the Community Regenerators cohort invited the cohort to start experimenting with campfire talks. So 35 members of this group were invited to practice campfires, which they did for about 3 months. And then they realized it was so powerful for forming bonds and relationships between them and discussing the topics coming up in their work groups that they decided to share it with the other well-established groups, the curriculum design group, Beyond Book Club, Regenerative Parenting, and so on. And so now we have about 100 members that are active in these groups who have been invited into the campfire talks for the last 2 months, really practicing, prototyping, learning how they work, because we want to share this with the entire network of 2,500 members, which continues to grow and will get even bigger. So how can these small, focused, relaxed, no agenda discussions, building bonds and trust between people, how can that be rolled out to 2,500 members while maintaining its quality, is what the Campfire Talks group is exploring as they've experimented with this. And they're very excited to share what they've been learning and to roll it out to the entire community, which is in process and will be coming very soon. So these Campfire Talks are going to be a big part of how you can very easily get involved in the community in a more intimate, human, personal, empowering way than you were able to last year. So you remember this diagram from earlier, the story of Earth Regenerators. Well, as we went from phase 1 of Joe's study group and then the community regenerators and the activities all started to take form, and they became, it's complex, and there are potential conflicts and confusions and cohesion and coherence. They break down when there's so much creativity, which is how we learned what we need to maintain those things. So we're now proposing the creation of this platform circle, which grows from within and among the design of the platform, the thematic groups, and the emergent projects. And all these people who are deeply active and care a lot and are building trust with each other. And by the way, many of them have been participating in the Campfire Talks. They are able to have coherence among each other to hold the idea of a platform, to hold the idea of what this whole system needs. Now, this will change as time goes on, so the participants and the membership of this platform circle will change as the composition of the groups changes. But right now, we have a set of groups, like the ones I described a few minutes ago, that can help constitute and manage this platform circle for the next few months as all of this continues to evolve. What this does is this empowers all of the social supports, all of the digital supports, the technological supports, the financial supports for small groups to network and weave amongst each other, which is how we build the network of Earth Regenerators. And this allows us to self-organize around different themes and topics. And it also allows us to self-organize around bioregional geographies for the regenerative work on the ground. And all of this is happening already. And this is where we're going, is to make all of this deeper, more clear, and more effective. See, it's already happening. Here are some examples in Barichara that can give you a sense for how it's all playing out. This image on the left is Ava and Thomas carrying a pile of barrels for a compost toilet project that Ava is leading. That's going to take place in a couple of our homes in the village, and then also in the Bioparque, the community reforestation project. So this is an idea that is spread within the community, but the two people who are leading it and doing the most work with it arrived from the global network. Thomas and Ava came here from Europe, and while Ava is here, she's leading this project. Someone from the global network gets a free education by coming here and builds a project that benefits the local community while being here at the same time. Now this image on the right, this person in the upper right is Stefan with his drone capturing video footage and aerial photography. And he came here from my Facebook network, is where we know each other. But this is a member of the global network who's participating in the local community and bringing high quality video and filming capacities and mapping and documenting for the research, which will also help with fundraising and other things. Hold on a second, sweetie. I'll be done in just a moment. Yes, sweetie? Can you wait just a minute longer? Daddy's going to be done with this presentation really soon. Now, this image in the bottom right, which I'm going to put at least because I want her to see it. You want to see this picture of you in a roller? No, I can't help you with that right now, sweetie. picture on the bottom right is our daughter Elise with our friend Oswaldo, who's a local guide, ecologist, and bird expert, as he is taking her out to show her the birds. Now, what's interesting here is we have a multi-generational learning process from a very wise and educated, very knowledgeable local person, a field tracker, guide, and ecological expert who is educating our children. But he's also been taking Thomas and Ava and Stefan and other members of our groups that come from the outside. He's been taking them out on field excursions to walk the land. So this learning process about how to understand a bioregion is deeply integrated into the work he does locally, but it's teaching people how to learn this way to then take back to other bioregions in different places. And then this image on the bottom left is me holding some beans, some seeds that were grown that we're going to replant. And I just want to stress the importance of this, that as we do all of this digital work, we're planting seeds for future collaboration and capacity. But at the same time, we're gathering seeds and planting trees and bushes and shrubs and grasses and other things to regenerate landscapes. And all of this is happening right now. And I just want to remind us all that this is applied cultural evolution. We're bringing what is known about collaborative groups, and we're applying it to our understanding that we are now in planetary collapse. And this enables us to immerse ourselves in regenerative design processes, doing it together as groups, as we live through the planetary collapse, which is what the Design Pathway book was all about. And that's what attracted people to this platform in the first place. Well, now we have ways to navigate planetary collapse, practice regenerative design, and do it together in communities, which is what all of us need. And so as we build this further, this will be our gift to ourselves and our gift to each other for all of us who participate in it. And so this emerging horizon is not hard to understand. We're going to upgrade the platform. We're going to invite delegates from existing groups that are well established to this platform circle. We're going to open up the whole process to the 2,500 members by making it clear what these existing groups are so that the members can more easily join them and then help create new groups as time goes on, which then gives those members opportunities to help with the platform circle after they get involved in these groups. And this allows all of us to co-create the design school for Earth regeneration, which is what we're doing together anyway. We've already been doing it for more than a year, and look how far we've come. Now, another thing I want to say is that we're going to have another community Zoom session in probably about 2 weeks. And so look for an announcement of that on the Earth Regenerators platform, which will allow each of you, please be quiet, will allow each of you to participate in active discussions about what we're talking about now. So if you don't feel like you get enough interaction and have your questions answered, know that this community Zoom call is coming soon, and look for the announcement because we'll be making it in the next few days. With that said, let's look to the horizon of the setting sun. Imagine how the sunbeams shining from afar are moving through the structures that exist now to give us a beautiful view of possibilities for what we can create together in the days, months, and years ahead. And that's my presentation. So, I'm really excited to share all of this with you guys. And I'm really looking forward to having discussions about this. And so what I'd like to do now is ask if anyone has questions to go to the Ask a Question button and pose some questions. And then we can start to answer them based on the voting of those questions. And the other thing that I want to really invite here is that this is something that we absolutely need to create together. And so I hope that you feel welcome and invited to participate in what is emerging now. Now I can already see Jeff has asked a question, what will the platform circle consist of? And so what I'll do is I will start answering that question while other questions come in. And Jeff, maybe if it's okay, I won't invite you onto the screen for this one because I think this one just deserves a little bit of an answer. So the platform circle, what it will consist of basically is it will consist of representation from the delegates of the different groups. So the groups that are really actively creating the platform now will be able to participate in making decisions. The platform will have a physical location, or rather an information location. It'll have a menu item or a tab that's on the platform. So the platform circle can give updates. A really simple way to think about this is think about if we had a monthly newsletter, the platform circle would be the place where we would aggregate the news and updates from the different groups and then post it there. So one thing about the structure of the platform group is that it's going to simply play a coordination role for communication between the groups and a communication of snapshots of what's happening across the network for the community at large, for all of the members. The other thing that the action circle will be able to do is it will be able to invite or receive recommendations for topics to explore that are at the platform scale. So the groups, like the curriculum design group, for example, might have a topic that's relevant to the entire platform, and then bring that to the attention of the platform circle, so that the platform circle can start a discussion around it. And then what's needed is to have transparency and inclusion in the decision-making process for that topic to then be discussed and to include the relevant groups, which might be all of the groups or it might only be some of the groups. And so one way we've thought about managing this to hold the decentralization and have transparency is to have an oversight group that is just there to be sure the platform group is functioning on behalf of the entire network, and have members of that group who watch it and maintain it. So a lot of these details are things that the governance design group had put into a proposal. And there are a lot of details that could be quite confusing because we don't really know what it's going to look like in practice yet. So what I think we really need is a period of time for 2 or 3 months where we practice creating it with representatives of different groups. We identify several platform level challenges that are present to those groups, and then we systematically work through addressing them while keeping the membership informed. And as we do that, the clarity of the processes and the structures will become like refined. So what I see now is we have the beginning, like a proposed initial structure and a proposed way of getting started. And what comes next is to practice doing it and then refine and improve it over the next few months. So I hope that's a good enough answer to your question, so that it gives you at least a sense. I see that Marco is asking a question that's, I think, a really good one. And that is, can we get personal support for starting a community regeneration project? So Marco, I'm going to invite you onto the screen so we can have a discussion about this. So this question about can we get personal support for starting a community regenerator project, I think is very interesting in 2 ways. And also, Marco, if you're there, just yeah, hopefully the technology doesn't always work when we invite people onto the screen. So I hope we don't have any technical glitches and Marco's able to join me. One thing that I want to say is that this question of how to get individual support is something that we really want to get clear about, how we provide a platform level solution. Hey, Marco, how's it going?
How are you? Fine, thank you.
Yeah, I'd love to hear what you're thinking here. Like, is this something where you have a project in mind, or just you're asking in general? Are you thinking of the kinds of challenges that people face or that you face? Just give me a little better sense of where the question came from for you, and then we can talk about that.
Okay, so right now I'm working on, wait, I'm having some technical problems. Can you hear me?
No, we can still hear you, but the video went away. So keep going.
So I'm working with this indigenous group in the Sierra Nevada of Santa Marta, and what we're doing right now is getting to know what their priorities are, and we're talking about having their in Spanish it's called seguridad alimentaria. So it's a family of like 6 small family groups and we're trying to regenerate the land by trying to conservate what they already have, because in they live in what we call a resguardo. They live in land that is already for indigenous communities, but they don't have the needs, or their economy is really hard, difficult.
Oh, looks like the connection dropped. Well, while waiting for Marco to hopefully come back, I hope Marco's able to rejoin us. I think it's great about his example is that there are several kinds of support that could be given to a project like this. Financial support, if that's needed, is we could look for ways to pool it together from the platform. We could also provide expertise and advising, like people who have subject matter expertise in water retention or food security, reforestation, or other topics that may be relevant. That there can be ways of inviting that kind of support and help. There can be social and emotional support for people who are going through hard times, having friends and mentoring, advising, or just a shoulder to cry on, even if it's a virtual shoulder. And what I think is really important is that this platform absolutely provides these kinds of support. And the way we need to figure out how to do this is that the request of support for one project or one person's needs doesn't undermine the ability of the platform to serve everyone else's. And this is really about us learning how to help each other. And we've already discussed the possibilities of creating things like having a crowdfunding mechanism to pool money and then provide scholarships or funding that can be allocated to people's projects. There are ways of doing participatory voting and decision making. A really cool framework for this is called liquid democracy. Yeah. Oh, Elise has a secret for me. Yeah, okay, tell me your secret. What's your secret? Oh, you want to see her? Elise was painting her face, by the way. So she's got some paint on her face. But what I think is really important here is that the platform needs to have a way for members to identify what their individual needs are in the context of what all of our needs are, or what are common needs or patterns of needs by a variety of people, so that we can build support structures that help all of us. And this is something that can become part of the curriculum. It can become focused work groups. It could become crowdfunding and crowd finance or collaborative finance tools on the platform, and other things as well. And so what I see is this is definitely the work of the work groups. There are some work groups that already focus on some of these things, depending on which part you're looking at, and areas that we haven't really managed to operationalize yet. But if members of the community come and join or create work groups in these topics, they'll be able to build them. Not yet, sweetie, but in a few minutes, okay? So, Mark, I'm sorry that we lost you there too to technology, but I hope that answers your question. I see we have another question here from Sebastian. Hi, Elise. Okay, Elise, I'll set you up for painting. So while I'm setting Elise up for painting, I'll start to answer Sebastian's question. Just have you managed to raise enough funding to get Barichara families to keep their land and stay locally? This is one of those questions that we could spend 3 hours discussing, because I've been involved in land negotiations for the last few months, and I still have a lot to learn, but I've already learned a lot. And what I would say is we have some interventions we're experimenting with, but we're dealing with very severe land speculation challenges here, as is true all over the planet. Yes, I'm getting you water for you to paint with. Okay, well then you can do it yourself. Here's another one. You can use that one. And so this question of raising money to help Barichara families keep their land and stay locally is sort of a paradoxical misstatement of a question, because a lot of Barichara families are not keeping their land and are moving away simply because they can make so much money selling their land. That, oh wow, this is cool. Marco, you returned as I was starting to talk to Sebastian on another question. Sorry,
Don't worry.
We lost.
Sorry. Yeah, we had technical problems. But I heard half of it. Maybe later we can keep in touch and keep with because I had some problems, but I'm sure we can work it out later.
Yeah, no,
I'm gonna
yeah,
I'm gonna close this tab so you can keep with the other question. Have a
thank you.
nice day.
Thank you. Muchas gracias, Marco. So yeah, Sebastian, what I think is interesting about your question is the reasons why people don't stay, which is mostly, wow, I could sell my land and make so much money because there are people from outside that are willing to pay it, that even if they don't need the money, they're doing just fine. The temptation when embedded in a consumer market economy. But anyway, I would love to talk about this in a two-way manner instead of monologuing. So I'd love to hear, what are you thinking here? Is this question coming from a place of just wondering how we're doing with fundraising? Is this coming from a place of thinking about the models of interaction and how local places can work with the global, or is there something else? Like, tell me more of what you're thinking about here, because it's really interesting.
Originally, I heard on your Future Thinkers, I think that's where I heard about, that you were talking about like what's next, and that in the next few months, either people were going to, leave, like Exodus, or they were going to, there was going to be a wave to incite people to stay longer. And so I guess I'm wondering I'd like to hear more about like what is it like what have you tried to engage different families on this issue? You know them like much closer now than maybe you did a year ago. So what are you trying with each of the people or like what's your approach to maybe getting them on board on a deeper level with, that this is the potential here in this place? And it's a classic thing in with COVID or anything. It's like gentrification in cities. It's like it's going to be really hard to persuade people to not take the easier opportunity. And so how do you go about that? That's where it's coming from.
Yeah, we have a really interesting example, because the piece of land that I showed the picture of in the presentation, the way we negotiated the purchase of that land, which we haven't bought it yet. We've raised the money to buy it. We negotiated to buy it. We offered to make a down payment, and then Colombian banks are really difficult for foreigners, and they won't allow us to legally let money enter the country. And so we're struggling to get them to let us have our money to buy the land. And there's a whole conversation about broken institutions that we can have.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is that piece of land is owned by a group of brothers and sisters that all inherited the land, originally from their grandfather, who passed it down to their father, and then passed it among all the kids. And there's 7 siblings. And the 7 siblings each own their own land, and 5 of them own farms below the land. So if we regenerate the land, we'll actually directly help their land. And what's interesting is all of these brothers and sisters are in their like 50s and 60s. So they have kids that are teenagers and in their 20s. And all of their adult kids have already left and moved to the city because they don't want to live in the country.
So they're the last ones, basically.
Yeah, and they all live in the same drainage basin, and their families lived there for generations, for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
So they're among the remaining people who didn't leave. And so what's really interesting is they are not taking care of this piece of land. It's very degraded. Each of them has their own land they take care of, but they don't take care of this one. And when we started a conversation about buying the land, it became a conversation about, we didn't raise enough money to buy it, so could we maybe create a nature reserve and help pay for the regeneration, but they keep it, but have an agreement to legally turn it into a nature reserve, which sets restrictions on the land. And then that evolved later into, well, actually, we can raise the money to buy it. And then we did. And it sort of evolved. But when we negotiated the purchase, this is really related to your question, we insisted that we would not buy the land from them unless they agreed to help care for the territory. So we said, we will regenerate this. We're like, this is your ancestors' land, and your grandchildren might inherit it because we're buying it for a foundation to own it. And And if we're going to regenerate this land, we need them to care for the territory too. So we're basically reminding them of their own responsibilities. And that opened up a very different kind of conversation.
Yeah.
So now we
How did they do that?
They were crying. They were deeply moved. It was a really powerful moment. And it opens up the possibility that if we start regenerating this land and then decide the best way to manage it is for them to be the managers of it, like maybe in 10 years from now, where they've really changed the way they think about the land, or their children and grandchildren are coming back, we could set up a cooperative with members that include their family and then hand ownership back to them. And so there are all these really interesting ways that we have the flexibility to explore depending on how the relationships go.
Wow.
And so it's really important is to have this pro-social process of building relationships is like the foundation of it all. Like that's the key to how it works. And this is the sort of thing that is very different from another piece of land we're looking at where land speculators own it. It's one guy who owns 1,000 hectares of land. He's buying and selling to make as much money as he can. I've met him. He's a total psychopath, parasitic human being, never rich enough, always trying to get a deal for himself. And in that situation, it's obviously very different. Whoever was on the land before has been displaced. We're trying to remove it from land speculation where they want to build a bunch of houses, but there's not enough water. So you see, in that situation, it's very different. So it's very much on this piece of land, develop a strategy. On this other piece of land, develop a strategy. And there's so much to learn by doing this on 10 different pieces of land that, probably we'd only buy 1 or 2 of those pieces of land, but the exploration of how to do it is where we're going to learn a bunch.
Got it. That's neat.
So,
just one more little thing in terms of the Colombian government not letting foreign money in or that kind of stuff. Is there some sort of way for anyone locally to maybe be spearheading that so that if it's through them, then it's perceived as local money or however it's done? Is that what you're exploring, or how is that going?
No, it's a specific technical thing that because they wanted to stop money laundering, they allowed banks to be the only money launderers. And so banks, I had a bank that held a lot of our money for buying the land for 5 weeks and refused to allow it into our account, but they earned interest on it the entire time. And then they sent it back to the US. That's just them benefiting from money laundering. And so, and they didn't have a good reason to send it back. They just did it for no good reason. And so what we learned is that if you don't go through a legalization process for the money coming in, then your purchases may not be recognized as legal. We have 2 friends, a lesbian couple from Belgium that are living here that bought some land with their money from Belgium. And they didn't go through this legalization process. And now even though they own the deed and the deed is in their name, when they applied for visas, their investment in the land didn't count because the money wasn't from a legal source. So you see, it's like central bank to the private banks to legalize the money coming in. So it's a very complicated situation because it's not like a Colombian friend who could receive the money.
No.
It's this particular technical step that the banks get to do. But this is just part of the learning process because we're now talking a lot about cryptocurrencies. And cryptocurrencies don't solve this problem. No. But we might find workarounds for things that we definancialize and don't use money. And we might use cryptocurrencies instead. But you see, it's like, what we need to do is really understand the mechanisms to do what PJ is saying in the chat box, which is how do we shift who takes advantage of these things? We have to understand how they work.
Yeah. And you have to do that in each context. You set up a landscape network, or be different in Colombia than say Vietnam or Angola or wherever.
Yeah, or even more, it's different on this piece of land than one that's half a kilometer away.
Yeah,
because
the
local social context and ecological context is so important. So this is where the bioregional immersion, the visiting a place and learning its complexities, it's incredible. This is better than university education.
Sure,
Universities need to become this.
Exactly.
Which is why it's so important for people to come and visit these kinds of projects and see how they work. and for people in work groups to participate vicariously by having reports from local people talking about the complexities and then brainstorming together.
That's really neat. Yeah. Thank you. And there's probably a lot more to be said about that, about universities becoming like that. I'm really interested in that right now. But I guess that's my question. Maybe we can talk more about that later, because that really is something I've been working on for a while. So cool.
Yeah.
Thanks, Joe.
No, Sebastian, thanks for the question. I really appreciate it. Let's see, it looks like we have one other question here. We're not getting a lot of questions today. I hope that means that people feel good about, actually, no, we don't have any other questions. Curious, I'll just post a quick poll. Hold on a second. Let's say, should we? I'm curious if anyone has any questions that they'd like to pose or comments you'd like to discuss. And in the meantime, I've just posted a question. Should we keep going? Yes or no? Like, are people really engaged? Are you inspired? How are you feeling about all of this? I see Pamela has a question, so I'll invite Pamela onto the screen while we answer that question and start rolling. And Pamela's question is there a plan B should the online infrastructure, climate, and economic systems become critically unstable? Undermines the ability for the platform to function. What I would say is there's, rather than a plan B, it's sort of like plan A1 and plan A2, which is we use this infrastructure while we have it, while at the same time building social connectivity to allow us to work without it wherever it's possible, so that if the infrastructure goes down, we can still do this work. I think this is a really important question. And what's beautiful about this question is that it highlights the importance of two things. One is the digital infrastructure can really help local projects, and local projects can really help the learning of people who are distributed in space. And so this relationship is quite powerful. But at the same time, the work locally is about building relationships and building community. So if we're doing that work well, then the work will continue even if the global infrastructure goes down, because the local resilience will have become stronger, and the social bonds between people and the trust will be better. So what I think of this is we leverage the infrastructure while we've got it, and we build the local capacities to operate without the infrastructure, whether the infrastructure goes down or not, and just run with it. And at any time it could go down, because there's some pretty big disruptions coming in the future. And so I think this is a really important question, and one that I'd love for us to explore further through interactions around trying out the logistics of different ways of interacting with each other. And we don't know yet what we can do with local mesh networks and other things to create a parallel infrastructure if the whole system goes down. So this is a really good topic of discussion and a great question. So thank you, Pamela, for asking it. I'm just curious, how did it's like everyone's like, let's keep going. All right, well, the 10 people who answered the poll anyway said, let's keep going. So we'll keep rolling with it for now. Let's see here. The next question that's got a lot of votes, which is coming from Doug Kent. So Doug, let's see if Doug is able to join me. Doug's an old friend. He's like, is the curriculum for kids, adults, or both? Anything particular for kids? What I would say to this one is there's a lot for kids that we're doing, and there's a lot for every age. And this is actually one of the key ideas for the idea of an ecoversity, which is a term that I had on one of the screens and we didn't talk much about. An ecoversity is a model of decolonization for education, and that the decolonization is contextualized in local culture and local ecology. It's an educational ecosystem for everyone in the community, which means there's prenatal and postnatal care, early childhood development, childhood education, adolescent development and education, and adult ongoing learning. And so I would say the curriculum work for kids is being developed in their regenerative parenting group, as well as locally what we're doing with the group of families here to create a community model of education. And there's a lot that's happening for adults on the platform. So the main point of connection for kids is that the members of the platform are parents. But there's absolutely a lot of focus in these two things, in these areas. So it's both and for sure. So Doug, thank you for your question. Let's see here. Next questions by votes. We have a good one here from Chris Lindstrom. Chris, if you're there, I'll invite you onto the screen. Notice I'm inviting people and they're not coming on for some reason. I hope we're not having technical problems. The question is, what's the timeline for the platform development? I would say the timeline is basically, we started developing the platform 13 months ago, and we now have a lot of capacity that's emerged. And what I see as the next steps is having this platform circle come into being in the next roughly 1 month as we build this capacity further. And then we just keep building all this out. Hey there, Chris. How you doing?
Hey, I'm good.
Been a while.
Yeah, I know. Seriously.
Yeah. Now let's talk about platform development. You know a thing or two about this too, I know.
Yeah, well, it's been one of those things where I'm like, we need a platform, and it's like, but every time I kind of engaged in this space of platform development, my brain kind of fragments in a million different places, and I'm like, I kind of get overwhelmed because it's not my expertise. But it's like one of those things where I'm like, I intuitively know that this is the the evolutionary impulse and future of the regenerative movement, and it has to happen. But I'm always thrilled and excited to see this conversation happening, But yeah, I'm curious where are you in its development, and do you have a team like totally selected? Have you raised money for the development? And
Yeah.
do you have a proposal, a business proposal, or a plan that you're putting out there?
This is a good question. What I would say is we are using the pro-social process to cultivate an ecosystem of teams. And as of right now, we have 25 or 30 that already exist. And it's all done without investment. We're about to raise $1,000 for a subscription upgrade. Like, we don't actually need investment to do it.
Yeah.
That's a very old toothpaste. That's pretty yucky
now. Yeah.
And
sorry.
Yeah, I think the key thing is to see the platform as the ecosystem of people.
Yeah.
And the technology has support structures for them.
Yeah.
That's really yucky toothpaste. It's old and yucky. It's probably moldy.
Yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful vision. What can be, I think, daunting and overwhelming for me is just how much capitalism kind of stacks the deck against us who are trying to work in this more pro-social way. And it's like there are all these platforms that are just kind of are exploding, that grow so virally. Facebook being the prime example, but now there's Clubhouse, which I sent you. I think I sent you an invitation, or I was meaning to, and I don't know if you want to get on it, but it's like one of these platforms that has the paradox of it's being adopted virally, it's growing exponentially, and it's an incredible vehicle for spontaneous conversation. There's already been a bazillion conversations on it about regeneration, and it's owned by bazillionaires, and it's already it's getting the investment through these traditional routes. It's raised, I think, $200 million. It's valued at $1 billion, which from a traditional perspective it's just the same old game. From our perspective, it's like it's the same game, but yet it's so effective in exponentially growing. And so I guess, how do you see this movement competing or overcoming that traditional old impulse, or psychology, the speculative psychology of.
I think one of the key things is anything that's growing exponentially is the wrong thing, and anything that's larger than human scale is the wrong thing. And so it'll just waste a huge amount of resources and attention, like U.S. elections do. When like $1 trillion is lost every election now in wasted investment for just a corrupt system that's going to die either way.
Yeah.
That what I see as really important is to slow down to the human scale and build deep relationships.
Mm.
And what we see happening is, I wouldn't say like Mighty Networks is our platform. The Mighty Networks is the app that we've used for being the home of Earth Regenerators, sort of by happenstance. Right. And what's really powerful is the deep relationships weaving amongst each other by the people who are engaging deeply in this work.
Yeah.
And what I've seen is what can happen with like 50 people who are woven into a tapestry can have transformational effects because it was woven over the span of a few months.
Right.
So this is a really important thing, is there are different kinds, and I see Vivek is like, when you have distinction between different kinds of platforms, it's really important. That's a huge discussion in its own right.
Can you open it?
I can open it. It's really funny shaped banana. Please, could you take it? You can open it. And what I think is really important here is the platform we're building is the platform of human relationships that enable us to hold each other through really hard times.
Sure. Yeah. So it's almost like it's almost like there's a meta platform that you're building, which is kind of beyond software. It's more of a kind of spiritual, cultural platform.
Yeah, I would say like culture is the platform. Culture is the platform.
Culture, yeah.
Yeah.
Regenerative culture.
Right, and it's a regenerative economy because of the way we interact with each other. And so, one of the themes that we saw with the community regenerators cohort was when the first gathering, I asked everyone if they would agree to a sacred contract that basically said, okay, I'll get this training for free in exchange for doing something to help Earth regeneration, which should have been like a no-brainer.
Yeah.
But enough people in the group had enough hardships with other groups that we actually had to spend a couple of weeks, trauma and trust, instead of signing the contract or agreeing to the contract. And what ended up happening was we never came back to agreeing to the contract. And instead we built a trust-based community where after 2 months we're like, well, we all basically did the contract. Every one of us showed up and committed. And no one needed to say it. And I think that difference is educational for how this works.
Right. So maybe there's a different term than exponential for how this can grow. I mean, because I feel like there's this paradox of like, yes, anything exponential is not really sustainable, and yet at the same time, the exponentiality of industrial technocentric capitalism is happening so fast that unless we can create something at a meaningful scale in a meaningful period of time, the wave of this kind of cataclysmic growth could just overwhelm.
Yeah, I think what we're talking about is a supercritical state for creating fractal patterns of emergence. And what's needed is for localized resilience in a context of globalized collapse.
Yeah.
So that enough of these can survive the next 50 years.
Right.
And what I feel is really emerging here is there's a set of people who are learning what it means to be in a regenerative culture.
Daddy, that one is too smushy.
And
Give me it.
there you go. You can eat it. Ace is eating a really smushy banana.
Yeah.
And that as we do this, what we discover is we decouple ourselves from the dominant system.
Totally. Yeah.
And that those of us who do that will participate in slower moving, more like a geologic scale things, while this hyper fast scale just destroys itself, which it'll do on the span of a couple of decades, which is really fast for the scale of it.
Yeah.
It's sort of like how the last climate change event that was this intense took 2 million years to happen, and we're doing it in 200 years.
Yeah.
And so that's a million times faster.
Right.
And so
no, I think Trump was the manifestation of the autoimmune reaction of our dominant civilization collapsing in on itself. It's like he created this kind of inflammatory response that's destroying and eating away at the very fabric of the dominant socioeconomic system that we've been part of. So it's just that, and I think that's just the beginning. I mean,
and I think
Biden's win is what's that?
The confusion around the term platform is that platform is often associated with Silicon Valley startups,
right?
Which are an inherently destructive cultural form, and so so we will never find the solution there. That is where we go to find really destructive cultures. But what we might find is really capable people who leave that. Actually, several of them are on this call now. I'm seeing like Alan's here commenting. I'm like, I know he does a lot of software stuff. Like people who participate in those systems and then left them,
right,
are very much doing regenerative things, but they're not doing it by being in them.
Right.
And that difference is really important.
Yeah.
I was just Lisa's face-to-face.
Beautiful work of
That's
art.
what happens. Dad's not supervising his 4-year-old.
Right. Yeah, I don't know if you've been in touch with Cassandra and Jennifer Menke and some of the jump scale folks, but I know they've been working on this kind of sacred contracts concept, and I've just recently kind of been trying to kind of dust off the RONF proposal, and I'm wondering what if you have any follow-on thoughts about that. The idea of doing this, for those who haven't seen it, it's a proposal for creating a rights of nature based economic framework, is what we've been calling it. And I guess I'm wondering if you see it as something that would be applicable in the regenerators, for the regenerators platform. I mean, do you imagine having a kind of a neo Earth centric constitution being something that could help galvanize people into the circle, and Earth-based Bill of Rights?
Yeah, we've talked about this a little in the governance group, and what we came to was that constitutions are inherently part of giving power up to something, and what we actually need is not agreement on a constitution, but embodiment of capacities to work in groups. This means the groups are autonomous, and this is actually one of Eleanor Ostrom's principles governing a commons, is basically a group needs to have jurisdiction over its own group, over its own activities, but it also needs to have harmony with other groups that it needs to interact with. This is where you get this idea she calls polycentric governance. And what I think is more important is cultivating pro-social capacities. Like to hold different perspectives, to be psychologically flexible, to regulate emotions and not be judgmental, to trust in the good intentions of others, and to be aligned around a set of Earth regeneration goals. And that cultivates norms and values, and it's way more powerful than a constitution. Having fun looking at the screen.
Yeah.
Well, Chris, thanks for all this great stuff.
Don't want to take up all the screen time. Thanks.
Yeah, no, let's talk more about it. It's great to see you, by the way.
Likewise.
All right, we'll keep the conversation going for sure. Let's see, where was that one so I can stop the... I have to stop answering before I can start answering the next one. There we go. All right, so the next question voted up with 6 votes is from David. says, I know you left the U.S. Do you still see any promise of this type of project in the U.S.? David, I'll invite you on the screen to talk about this. And I'll start by saying I definitely see a lot of promise of this type of work on the North American continent, and it's helpful to just not think in terms of nation states. But that's a topic we can discuss if you're able to come on the screen. Ellie, sweetie, quieter, please. Thank you. Because this question of promise of this type of work in the U.S., I think there's promise of this type of work all over the planet. And one thing that we've learned among the people who are doing this work in a more intimate way in the Earth Regenerators cohort is that there's a lot of like indigenous partnerships in different parts of North America, like in the Pacific Northwest, in Wisconsin and Minnesota, and in the Hudson Valley and so on. Hey, David, how's it going? Welcome.
Good job. Thanks.
I don't know if you heard what I was saying, that I think the answer is an overwhelming yes, but it's helpful not to think in terms of nation states. Like the U.S.
Repeat that last part real quickly. Sorry, my computer's a little slow.
Yeah, it's helpful to not think in terms of nation states. Like to go to a more local scale and see like what's happening in my watershed or in the region that I'm in. And what you find is there's a lot of bioregional stuff already happening. It just can't really flourish. It's so suffocated by that bigger system.
Yeah. I wondered if you had any specific environmental concerns also when it comes to, I've heard some of your interviews and things, and I don't recall you saying anything specifically why you had taken your family and your vision to Colombia. You're in Colombia, right?
Yeah, we're in Colombia.
Yeah.
I mean, for us, it was really a search for how we could be in a community and do territorial scale work. And my wife is a good example of the question you're asking, because she worked for the University of Washington doing waste diversion in Seattle, and then later worked for the city government in Eugene, Oregon on their climate action plan. And in both cases found that even if the work was really good at a project level, the larger system was overwhelmingly going in the other direction. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, oh, we did good. It's 67% waste diversion for the 80,000 people at this campus. Yeah. But the city of Seattle, look at what it's doing. Right. And that was very disheartening to her. So we personally were looking for a place where there's enough, like sort of absence of functioning institutions, which definitely has a dark side. But the bright side is that it allows people to creatively be empowered to do things. Yeah. Where like here, if we have a bunch of neighbors that want to regenerate their watershed, they can. Mm-hmm. But if people want to come and build hotels and destroy the watershed, they can. You know, it's like both. Yeah. And both are sort of happening at the same time. So it's this game of which one wins. Right. But we feel like we can actually make a difference because the institutions aren't getting in the way.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. And were you seeing anything environmentally as far as potential environmental problems that we're probably going to see in the near and more distant future, as far as the United States is concerned, as opposed to Central and South America?
No, I think the biggest problem in the United States is that it's a heavily medicated, heavily militarized place with a disgustingly extractive and oppressive economy, especially to its own population. And so
I wish I could argue with you.
Just stating the facts here, I'm afraid. And so it's a place where community is weak. People have a really hard time getting along with each other. And it's currently in a post-empire downward trend. Yeah. You call it an empire in decline if you wanted to give it a fairly accurate description. Sure. Basically been in decline since about 1980 from an economic point of view. And right. And so it's a place where you can anticipate the kinds of problems at the governmental level, which are pretty evident at this point in time. Yep. There's a tendency of where that's likely to go. And so the question is, in your local place, do you have community and do you have connection to land and the ability to do things? And a lot of people don't, but some people do. So that's why the question at the national level isn't as useful as the local level.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks a lot, Joe. I appreciate it.
No, totally, totally. And there's a lot to be done in North America. As one thing North America has is an abundance of ecotypes, types of ecosystems,
Okay.
types of localized climate systems.
Right.
And so there's a lot you can work with to do regenerative work locally in different places.
Yep.
And a lot of well-educated people who would really like to be doing it if they were able to.
Yeah.
So it depends on where you are.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, thanks for the question, David. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for your time.
Totally. Let's see, we got lots of questions came in all of a sudden. This is great. And I think David's question is a really good one because one of our challenges is to not look for the solution over there. Like, what do I do where I am? Or if I need to leave, where do I go? These are big questions. So I think they're really important. I see that I have a question here from Rosencrantz, which is, I'll invite you onto the screen. Spoken before about your food forest. How's it going? Yeah, this is a really good way to bridge what's happening in the online platform, what's going on with our food forest. Because one of our challenges as a family is we don't yet have a place to build our own food forest. We're helping with regeneration of the native forest in the Bioparque, this community reforestation project. But as we're building up the capacity to do our own, my wife's vision of a food forest for our family is we need a piece of land to live on. And the Bioregions Regeneration Fund is moving in the direction of being able to work on land for longer periods of time. So your question is very deeply connected to the development of the platform and of the bioregional work. Hi, Rosencrantz, how are you? Good to see you.
Yeah, Rosecrans is the last name. I must have signed up in a strange way, but it's okay. I'm just one of the Gales. There are a lot of Gales.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, hi, Gail. As one of my friends said yesterday, is we have Gale Force winds and spelling Gale in the name way, because there's a powerhouse of Gales in the community. So thank you. Yeah. Tell me more of just how you're feeling about this conversation and what you'd like to hear, what we can talk about. I'd like to hear from you and not be talking so much myself.
Well, just really briefly, I'm interested in food, and I'm interested in someplace in France where I live, getting something started that would be based on, people have used the words food security, but I don't know what it means. I mean, a food forest sounds like Candyland to me somehow. I'm just not sure. Do you really feed people, or it's for snacks? I mean, can you really live in a food forest how many people can it feed? I mean, how do we establish how do we learn these kinds of things, for each bioregion?
Yeah, I mean, a great place to start is there's a 12-minute video that Jeff Lawton, the permaculture teacher from Australia, is just called "What is a Food Forest?" That really does, in 12 minutes, will give you a really good sense of it. But I know of an example in Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam, where something like 24 families have been living out of their food forest for 300 years, providing all their food. And what is called in Mesoamerica, most closely associated with the Mayan civilization, the milpa. The milpa has been an agroecology food system that's lasted 10,000 years and has supported people's livelihood as civilizations rise and fall. One reason why the Mayan civilization went away, but the Mayan people didn't, is the Mayan people had milpas, which is a really intensive form of, it's actually not agriculture. It's because it has a minimum of 12 different kinds of edible foods. But then there's construction materials, medicinal plants, clothing materials, and textiles are all built into it as well. What do you need, Liz? Oh, I see. We'll get them out there. He's out now. And I think it's really important to, instead of thinking, like the food forest concept is really interesting, what's even more interesting is the idea of a forest economy, where the forest is the economy. I'll just give you some visual examples. If you look at my roof, this is stepped on you so you can see it. That is called Caña Brava, which is a relative of sugarcane, which grows like a tall grass. And then the wood, it's held in structure up. And here is a basket made out of a type of grass. And then there are different kinds of fruits and plants. Here's a plant right here called hoja santo, which is edible and delicious, kind of like spinach, but also medicinal for inflammation and infections. And so the key thing here is when you think of the whole forest is the economy, then what you need is all the know-how. You have to know the plants and their uses and know how to process them. And then you have a forest economy. And the idea of a food forest is really just that, framing it about food. But it's actually about all of it. So food forest is a beautiful phrase, but it's also sort of limited because it's really the entire economy. Yeah, and Elise is here holding Caña Brava, demonstrating. Right? Elise has Caña Brava, so you can see it. It's also fun to play with. This is Caña Brava being used to make compost with it. And so, so this thing about food security is also connected to water security and maintaining soils, and like all of them are connected. It's an integrated system.
And is Earth regeneration the creation of a forest economy, or is that they're just levels of you're building up from, I don't know, retaining the water to eventually being the forest economy? Is that?
Well, what I'd say is the way that we regenerate the entire planet is we create the conditions locally in as many places as we can where people can live sustainably. And that means having full circulatory flow of materials in a localized economy. There might be some trade partners to other places, but instead of 90% coming from somewhere else, it's 90% is coming local. And the places that do that will be much more likely to survive climate chaos and the other things in the next 50 years. And so what ends up coming with this is the acknowledgement that the human population is too big, and there are a whole set of ethical predicaments associated with that are already built into the global system. So we're not trying to maintain an unsustainable culture. That's a really key thing. Oh, you want to show? She at least wants to show you even more Caña Brava because she's getting more. She's excited to show it to you. Thank you, Elise.
That's great.
But the idea of being an Earth regenerator is recognizing how your local efforts are connected to the planetary efforts and linking them together.
Okay. And the landscape regeneration is just building it up from the ground.
Well, it's really recognizing that there are natural organizing principles for territories. There are watersheds and drainage basins and soil types and plate tectonics that shape things, types of forests, types of ecosystems, transition zones between ecosystems, and all those things are where you build your economy. And so what's really key is reintegrating humans into the landscapes and putting ourselves as fully as possible into them. And what this turns into then is the territory becomes the teacher. Your school is the territory. You go out into the territory to learn, and you really learn from the territory what it needs to function. And this way of teaching and learning becomes what indigenous cultures are. That's how they naturally evolved. And we just need to intentionally design them because we're in this unprecedented time of rapid change. So, so the idea is to create design schools that are these territorial projects. And so the Barichara project is one, but they're all over the world doing this. So this is bigger than just like our family having a food forest or someone else's family having a food forest, although that's an important part of it, definitely. But it's really about cooperating across an entire territory and then doing this all over the world. Wow, and Elise has even more content about it because she's so excited. So with that said, but you're backlit, so it's
That's great.
very excited. Elise is participating now.
Okay.
Thank you, Gail. Does this answer your question?
Thanks very much. Yeah, very much. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Noticing that we're getting to the 10-minute mark for our 2-hour time frame, which means it might be a good idea for us to start a wrap up pretty soon. And yet we have all these great questions. And so I see one from Pamela that I can just answer quickly. She asks, what is the status of your book? And is it currently fitting in your priorities? And I'm like, yes, Pamela, thank you for reminding me, because Pamela offered to help format and prepare the book for publication. I would say that the book is becoming a high priority again now that we are wrapping up a round of fundraising for the Bioregion Regeneration Fund. And as soon as my time is not held up with lots of frustrating visa and banking issues, I'll be able to give more attention to it on a regular basis. But I completely agree that that's a key part of this. And still just need to get the finishing touches on it whenever I can do so. I see there's another question here from, oh, Pamela's asking lots of popular questions. Oh no, we already got that one. Just didn't hit the button, I guess. Let's see. Suzanne, do you know the new world will have so little conformity to standard rules that children will be running free, talking and interrupting? If I had the ability to have someone watching my child while I was facilitating this, I would, but I had that fall away at the last minute, and so wasn't able to have someone watching her. I see Drew is asking about the inevitable tragedies of climate change. How do we prioritize hospice care? Which I think is a really good question. How do we prioritize hospice care? For me, this question of prioritizing hospice care is really about recognizing what is dying and healing through the grieving process. For me, this is about embracing the grieving process. Just something that I wrote about in the book and we've talked about a lot in other webinars. I see holding space for grieving as being essential to this work. And that we're not going to get to the future and regenerate the landscapes we live in without regenerating ourselves. So this is a really key question. What I wonder now, because I'm just noticing what time it is, that it's getting close to the 2-hour mark. And what I'd love to invite is for us to just have a quick sharing in the chat box. If each of you could share one word, phrase, or sentence about how you're feeling about the presentation and the discussion we've had today. If you could just share that in the chat box, what that'll allow is for all of us to see what everyone's feeling at the moment. So how are you feeling right now about the materials that were presented, the conversation and the discussion we had afterwards? I just love to hear what all of you are thinking. And so, see, Christine is grateful. Thank you, Christine. Start showing your comments here and we'll get a little feel of the room. Letting grief into the world can make it sacred. I completely agree with that, Gail. Clarity and encouragement, satiated and full. I'm fulfilled to see the work that we're doing, feeling the love, feeling full and grateful, excited, inspired, and provoked. The need for project support, more hopeful, connected. Yeah, we want to have more support all around. Thank you for the clarity, so many gifts. I very much like the dialogues. Thank you all for this, tightly woven, mind-opening. Yeah, what I see this as is this is some of the most difficult work we can be doing, but it's absolutely essential we do it. Feeling good that I held it all together, thank you. Then I see people still chatting with each other, which is wonderful. We have lots of great conversations in the side chats, which is great. Benjamin checking in with the Earth Regenerators again. It's great to have you here. Cole, I'm inspired too about the emergent pathway. And yeah, these challenging words, of course. Okay, I'll come help you in just a second, sweetie. So, yeah, well, I want to say thank you all for spending 2 hours with me on a Sunday afternoon or Sunday night or Monday morning for some of you in the Eastern Hemisphere of the world. I really appreciate all of you being here. And what we're going to do is we're going to share an announcement about a community Zoom call that we'll have in about, I think it'll be in about 2 weeks, but we'll share the announcement soon. Diego and I will organize that together, so we'll get back to you soon about that. And I also would love to just have you, share your thoughts on the platform, reach out to me directly. There's a private chat feature, like a messaging system, like Facebook Messenger, that you can use in Earth Regenerators if you'd like to reach out to me directly. And otherwise, just start looking at the groups that are there. Go into Earth Regenerators on the left under the groups menu item and get involved in any of the groups that you'd like that are open to join at the moment. And we'll be adding more and making it much easier to join them in the near future as we structure all of this out. And for all of you who are in those groups and doing all this great work, have been on this call today, thank you all. I hope that I've honored and held your work well and fairly and presented it well. I really deeply appreciate all that you're doing and love you all for it and feel very held by you and all that you're doing. So with that said, thank you all for this time together today and really looking forward to all the work we can do in the coming year. Great. Well, see you all soon and goodbye, everyone.